Hi. The film I'll be talking about today is Raggedy Man. This film was directed by Jack Fisk and was released in 1981. This film stars Sissy Spacek, Eric Roberts, and Sam Shepard. This was the first film that Jack Fisk would ever direct. He had worked with great directors as a production designer and still works today. He worked with Terrence Malick on his debut film, Badlands. That's where he met, fell in love with, and married Sissy Spacek. This would be their first film where he was actually directing her. They'd collaborated in the past, but this would be their first film when he directed her. And this was also her first film after her Academy Award-winning performance in Coal Miner's Daughter. And she delivers another knockout performance in this film. This film takes place in Texas during the 1940s, during World War II. And it starts off, we see at night, and we see this car kind of coming down the road in the headlights. And then the camera kind of pans in to the home, and we see Spacek's character's face from the lights from the car outside. And it kind of lights up the room a little bit, and we're able to see the family photographs with her husband and child. Shepard's in the photograph, Sam Shepard, her husband Harry. And we see the picture of the dad in the white shirt and his khaki, like the one good outfit that they both have, standing there holding their child. The kind of family photographs people took back then before everybody had like 200,000 photographs of themselves on Facebook and before the phone became a camera. And we then see Sam Shepard at a bar. It kind of cuts from the shot of her sitting at home in bed alone to him being at a bar. And he goes and grabs a beer, and we see him go approach this woman, and they begin to dance, and he's got a cigarette in his mouth. And then the camera pans outside, and we see Sissy Spacek, who plays Nita Longley in the film, watching him. And she's not only watching, she's holding her young child in her arms, and her other little boys behind her. And we just see her take it in. But we know immediately she's tough because she just sits and watches. She takes it. She doesn't go in and make a scene. She doesn't start crying. She kind of comes to terms with it, turns around, and then looks at her son and says, "Come on, Harry, honey, let's go." And then the music begins to play, and they roll the credits, and we're introduced to the town, Gregory, Texas. And one of the great things Fisk does as a director in this film is the way he introduces us to Gregory, Texas. The way we see the town at sunrise. And a lot of directors don't capture the movement of a small town. And he does that brilliantly here. How time doesn't just go by slowly. As Hank Williams said, it goes crawling by at a snail's pace. Things here move slow. And while in the film it's Gregory, Texas, actually filmed in Maxwell, Texas, because Maxwell, and this is in 1981, only had a population of 200 people. So they didn't really have to change much to capture a one-horse town. When they went there, it was already there for them. And the film then cuts to 1944. When we first met Nita Longley, that was 1940. And then, it says Gregory, Texas, 1944. So we catch up with her 4 years later after we've seen the shots of the town at sunrise of Gregory, Texas, and this town that seems like the kind of town that has been forgotten. That, nothing much has ever happened, nothing much ever will. It's just one of those towns that it's weird to think that people even live there. It's got that kind of a vibe to it. And we then get a shot of Spacek's character. She's a switchboard operator for a telephone company. And when we first see her on camera, she's sitting there typing, kind of talking to herself, and also, answering every ring of the switchboard, putting people through. And she's typing out a letter basically asking for a better job, and a job that will allow her to make more money and be there for her boys. Because as a switchboard operator, she's the only one in that town. And she, day and night, she's there. She never is not. It's kind of like she's always on call. She doesn't have days off. And We then see her boys outside playing in the tree, the way that kids really used to play outside when they use their imagination. I was obviously not around in the 1940s, and it even made me kind of lament the days when kids knew how to play. And it's been so long since I've seen a film capture that accurately on camera like this one did, seeing them up in the trees. And when you're that age, you're not just climbing a tree. There's a war going on. He's pretending that he's shooting at the Nazis, or that he's a sniper, that he's doing all this fun stuff. And when you were that age, all you needed was a good imagination. At most, maybe a stick that you could pretend was a gun, and you were set for the day. And her boss rolls in, and then he goes in, and he's just kind of collecting money and talking to her. And we realize real quick that her boss has no use for her. He disregards her when she kind of inquires about, maybe is there some other thing I could do? Like, this was supposed to be a stepping stone. There's a war going on. That's all he says. There's a war going on. I don't know what to tell you. There's just a war going on. And basically, people in the Philippines have it worse than you do, so quit complaining. And we realize that she's really up against it in this town. She and her husband are no longer together. She's got 2 little boys. She's tied to that switchboard. She's got no real life. She's just basically trying to get, not even day to day as much as minute to minute. Then we see her boys kind of go into town with the wagon, just knocking around. There's nothing really to do, so you just meander and see what you run into. And that's where we meet these 2 ne'er-do-well brothers that are played by 2 of the greatest character actors ever, Tracy Walter and William Sanderson. Tracy Walter is one of my all-time favorite character actors. He is incapable of giving a bad performance, whether it's in Repo Man, Batman, City Slickers, Philadelphia, and there's so many right now that I am forgetting. But he's always good. He has that effortless charisma that just can't be taught. It's a gift, and he's blessed enough to be one of the actors working that has it. And we see them pick at the boys. These are not sophisticated men. They're kind of just like bullies. And they're a little emotionally delayed. And the way people at that time in towns like that would describe them is no account. They're just no account. They ain't all there. And they're kind of picking at the boys, and we get a feel for what they're like out of that scene. And it's in this scene that we see this character walk by, dragging this broken down, worn out lawnmower behind him. And he wears this brown jacket, has a hat that's kind of covering his face. And we don't get a good look at him. And we hear one of the brothers say, "Raggedy Man," as he walks by. They refer to him as a Raggedy Man. And nobody seems to know who he is. And the camera, when you see him, you get him, but it's like you catch him in a shadowy kind of way. You don't get a good view of him. And he's kind of like this phantom. He's there, but you can't ever quite figure out who he is, where he's from, get a good look at him. Every time you want to get a better look, he's gone. We then see the brothers later talking about the boy's mother, who they had just picked on, about how they need to get by there and try to take her out sometime. And, she's divorced. And a woman like that, she's not like she doesn't have urges. We need to get over there. And they drive over, and the first attempt is made by the William Sanderson character. He tries to go, and he gets rejected. And she does it as politely as she can, but, I got to work. I just can't do it. And it's a sad scene to watch, because even though he's not a great guy, it's hard to watch someone be rejected. And then you feel sorry for her, knowing that these are the kind of prospects that she has in this town. This is it. That's what's waiting for you. And look at where she lives. It's not like, quality guys are coming through there on a regular basis. She's in the middle of nowhere. And he goes back to the car, and his brother's kind of giving him a hard time, and they just drive off. And off to their life again. And later that night, a hard rain starts to fall, and there's a knock at her door. And when she opens it, this is when we meet Teddy, who's played brilliantly by Eric Roberts. Eric Roberts is known as a very kind of strong performer, has a lot of gravitas, very, aggressive. This is a very restrained, subtle, gentle performance. To me, it's the best thing Eric Roberts has ever done, and I think he's a great actor. I loved him in Star 80. But the bravado and the kind of surliness and intensity that he usually brings to parts, there's none of that here. None of it. And he basically says, somebody told me I could make a phone call here. And she goes, yeah, come on in. And he's in his sailor outfit. And he calls home for Oklahoma, and we realize he's calling to check on this girl, and her father answers. And through the conversation, we realize that the girl that he was calling about has gotten married, and the dad has to be the one to kind of tell him that. And Eric Roberts' face, Teddy, the way it just slowly changes when he comes to that realization that the thing that he thought would be waiting for him when he got out of basic, before he went to be shipped off, the girl that maybe he'd been thinking of that entire time, that's over. And Sissy Spacek, while she's on the other side of the room, Nita hears everything. And then when he goes to leave, it's still really coming down. And she feels for him, and he's a nice looking guy. She doesn't see that too much, and she doesn't see a guy who seems to have a decency about him either much. And she says, would you like to stay and have a cup of coffee? And he said, oh, what's rain to a sailor? And right when he says that, the lightning cracks, and the next scene we just see is Sissy Spacek's hand going for the mug and bringing it down, the coffee cup. Watching the two of them have the cup of coffee together across from each other at the table is one of the most real, romantic, and endearing scenes I've ever seen in a film, because of how real it feels, of two people who don't say they're lonely, but that they are. And seeing them discover each other, and in a way, rediscover themselves. This has been the first time for her, somebody sitting across from her, making eye contact. She's starved simply for an adult conversation, but you can tell it's been so long since she's even been able to have a crush. There hasn't even been that opportunity. The feelings, the butterflies that can come, if anything, it's like they were dead, and then he's reminded her, no, those feelings were just dormant, but they were never dead. And how when you're seen by someone, not only does it make you feel good, but it allows you to see yourself again. Because we realize that she's not just invisible to those around, she's become invisible to herself. She's just somebody, yes, can I put you through? Yes, can I do this? She's somebody who has responsibilities, and that's it. She doesn't have relationships. She has her boys, but they're at that age where they're outside. She doesn't even get enough time with them. And to be able to simply converse with someone at a table over coffee and talk to each other. And there's a scene where he's poured too much coffee in. He's put the sugar in, it's kind of spilling out of the cup, or the mug, I should say. And he goes, and she's like, I'll get you another plate. And he says, no, and he kind of takes the plate that was under the coffee and pours it back in. And it's an awkward moment, but it works in the film because it makes it that much more real. Just that little scene. And then later on, the lights cut. Lightning strikes, and she says, oh, don't worry, it'll cut back on. And hearing them continue to talk in the dark, and at a certain point he lights a cigarette, and they kind of can see each other, and then they're continuing the dialogue, and eventually the lights cut back on. And at this point, she's thinking that that's all she's going to get out of this, but that was enough. If that is it, that was worth it. Just to have that type of connection for that amount of time, no matter how fleeting it is, it was something. And he goes to leave, and as he goes outside, the rain has really picked up, and as he's walking down, the lightning cracks again. When he turns around, who does he see but the Raggedy man who carries the rundown lawnmower with him? He's just standing there. And he sees him like in the rain. It's coming down. And then when he looks again, the guy's gone. So he decides to go back and crash out on her front porch under some, not shade, but shelter, we'll put it that way, from the rain. And the next morning, the boys discover him. And she gets up and he said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I just wanted to sleep here during the rain." She's like, "Oh, no apologies necessary." And then she goes back into the switchboard and she immediately goes out and says, "Boys, go get the neighbor. It's from Washington." And seeing the woman come over with her baby, and she just kind of hands it to Eric Roberts. And she walks in and she looks at Nita and she just says, "I don't know. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I just know it's from Washington." And then when she comes out, it's as if the weight of the world has been lifted off of her, because Nita looks at Teddy and says, her husband was not killed, he was wounded, and he's coming home. And she tells the boys to go walk her home, and they sit down, and he said, "I guess you get a lot of calls like that, don't you? Or you see a lot of stuff." And she just simply acknowledges that she does. And it's the first time that somebody has kind of empathized with her plight, with what she has to do. We know what the soldiers do. We appreciate what the soldiers do. But we very rarely think about someone like her. We really only think about the people in the situations that they make movies about, not somebody who has to just get through day-to-day life doing what she's doing, because it's not glamorous, but it's hard. And then when the boys get back, we see Eric Robert Teddy playing with them out in the field. And we see Sissy Spacek kind of watching it and seeing what her boys have been missing as well, and falling more in love with Teddy because he truly is enjoying this time with her children. He's everything she's been waiting for. He appreciates her. He appreciates the job that she has to do. He appreciated the conversation. He admires the type of mother she is, and he's enjoying time with the two boys that make her life worthwhile. And watching her watch him with them, and seeing two people fall for each other for the right reasons. This is not lust. It's deeper than that. They're falling in love emotionally. And the physical thing is there, but inside they've already fallen, and they've fallen hard, even though physically they haven't done anything yet. And later on, he's in the kitchen with them, and the boys kind of beg for him to stay. And he says, "Well, I don't want to overstay my welcome." And they say, "Oh, you won't. And he looks at her, and she said, "It's really fine if you'd like to stay. We'd love to have you." And so he agrees. And after the boys have been put to bed, he's talking with her that night as he makes her a cup of coffee. And he said, "I don't want to pry, but what's the deal with their father? Does he ever come around?" And she says, "Unfortunately, not." And he said, "I don't understand that." And she said, "Well, we had kind of a messy divorce, and we heard when the war started, he joined the army, but that's the last I heard. We haven't seen, anything of him." And you can see him thinking, how could anybody that had this discount it? And how often is it that those that have it don't seem to appreciate it, and those that would give anything for it, there seem to be these entanglements and situations that keep it just out of reach. He knows what that guy gave up, and he knows how grateful he would be to have it, to have a woman like that, to have two boys like that. If somebody could be that flippant about it, that doesn't compute with him. And he tells her later that he'd like to take the boys to Corpus Christi. And she says, "You really That's really nice, but you don't have to do it. They said, no, I'd like to take them in, let them see a picture show. And she's like, oh, they've never seen one. And she eventually agrees, and he says, why don't you come with us? And she said, I can't. He understands. She's like, I got to be here. And as he turns, she says, but I would really like to. Letting him know it means a lot that you asked, because there isn't anything. If I could, I would be there. And it means a lot that you did ask. And so the next day, he's with the boys. They're out on the Ferris wheel. They're doing all this fun stuff. He takes them to a movie. We see them at the beach. But the scene that I really love the most is there's a scene with Sissy Spacek at home. And she's got the broom, and she's cleaning, and this song comes on the radio. And it's about rum and Coca-Cola. And she starts dancing to it and moving to it with the broom and singing along. And we get the feeling that this is as light as she has felt in so long. She's alive. Even in this town where there's now that somebody like Teddy has come along and reawakened her, and the way it feels when you're in love. He's revitalized her. And in a way that maybe she didn't even think possible. To where something as mundane as having a broom and sweeping, but when the right song comes on and you already are in that frame of mind, you can enjoy anything. And at that moment, she's not a mother who's a switchboard operator. She's like any young girl with a schoolgirl crush. And as an audience, it's a very intimate scene because we get to see her happy in a way that we feel like has eluded her for far too long. And just seeing her move and sing to that song and really become young again for just that moment, because we know it won't last forever. She's still got to be mom. She's still got to work at that switchboard. But in that moment, she's free. And she just kind of gets to be among the clouds for a second. And later on in the film, she is taking a bath. And we see that the two brothers that made overtures toward her earlier in the film kind of creeping outside the window and staring at her. And she gets the sheriff on the phone, and she said, I'm here by myself. He said, well, from what I hear, you're not here by yourself. Letting her know, I don't really feel sorry for you and the kind of woman that you are. You're a divorced mother, how dare you, and you're carrying on with this sailor. And she said, I know what I saw. And he just kind of dismisses it. And she also lets him know that she has seen the man that everybody in town kind of refers to as the Raggedy Man from a distance. And he said, oh, that's just some guy named Bailey. I think he does yards. He's no trouble. Don't worry about him. He's on about his way. And we know at this point she's got no support in this town. And then Teddy returns back with the boys, and he had them in these little sailor suits, and she's told him how cute that was and, how much she appreciated what he did. And then he lets her know that he has a gift for her. And when she takes the gift in her hand and their hands connect, something just seeing them do that, and then they slowly rise. And because we've seen them fall for each other emotionally, once we realize that they're going to give into it, that they're not going to restrain anymore, you don't see anything in the scene. They just kind of kiss, and they kind of are dancing and make their way to the bedroom. But it's one of the more intimate scenes because it sounds cliche to say feel the love, but we do. We've seen these people fall for each other and really fall for the real person. So when they do come together, there's an intensity that's there that can't be manufactured without a genuine chemistry. And the next morning, she gets up and the boys are outside playing, being loud. She goes to get them in, And Teddy comes outside and he goes, "Oh, don't worry about that." And he's got his shirt off and there's two women walking that see it. And she kind of storms in. Is like, "Couldn't you have just stayed inside coming out like that?" And he's like, "I just had to put my shirt on." She said, "I have to live here." And then he takes the boys into town. He's got some errands to run. He says, "Why don't you boys go on home to your mom and then I'll catch up with you later." Well, they're intercepted by the brothers that had been peeping around the night before. And they get them into a bar and they're like, "Here, buy them an orange drink." And they start kind of probing and getting rough with the kids. And then Teddy comes in and a fight breaks out. And eventually he leaves with the boys and gets home, and Nita is furious. And she's like, "What were you boys doing?" He said, "I don't know." And she said, "Yeah, you didn't know." And she's very angry. And he says, "Listen, don't be too hard on them. Don't." And she said, "You need to go." And he kind of looks at her and she said, "I can't make this work. I can't, no matter how hard I try. This can't be. You got to go." And he accepts it. And after he's packed his stuff up to go, he tells her, maybe down the line one night when it's raining, you'll hear a knock at the door and it'll be me. And she kind of smiles and says, "Well, maybe." And right when he goes to say, "I love you, Nita," switchboard rings. She's got to answer it. And the very reason she's kind of saying, "I can't," tells him right there, she's got too much. She can't add this. And then he goes and says his goodbye to the boys, And then they kind of wave. And it's a pretty gut-wrenching scene. We both know that they know what they've had. You don't find it that much. And I have to backtrack a little bit because I forgot this one thing. The night that she was intimate with Teddy for the first time, after it kind of shows them the camera pans outside into the dark, and we just see kind of from far away the Raggedy Man just outside. And then the camera zooms in, and we see that half of his face is burned. And then we get a shot at the other, and we realize who the Raggedy Man is. It's our ex-husband, Harry. Sam Shepard. That's the one that's been around this whole time, kind of lurking in the shadows from afar. And that is a big reveal. So I apologize for having to circle back to that. But now we're at the point where the boys are very angry at her for having made Teddy leave. And they said, "We want to be with our dad. We want to go with him." She goes, "What makes you think he'd have you? You think he's at the door?" Because as far as she's concerned, he's a no-show. He's gone. He vanished. And her oldest son looks at her and said, "He wants us. He just doesn't want you." Talk about a gut punch. She takes the plates and goes outside and just throws them out in the yard and said, "We'll feed it to the chickens." And then she comes and sits down and looks at her plate and gets it up and does the same thing. But resilient as she is, we see her at their bed later, kind of pulling the covers over them, putting her hands. She's still their mother. She still loves them unconditionally. And then we see the final conflict with her boss saying, "I can't do this anymore. This was supposed to be a stepping stone. I need something better." Falls on deaf ears. He doesn't want to hear it. "There's nothing I can do. You're lucky I've even done this." And at that point, she just gets up, walks away, and goes, "What are you doing? I'll put the word, nobody will hire." And she goes to the bus station. She buys tickets for San Antonio. They're leaving. She's going to do what she has to do, but she's not going to do that anymore. That thankless job, running the switchboard, trying to be a mother, it's diminishing every aspect of her life. And she's made a decision that she's taking control now. And as they're packing up that night, she puts them to bed, and then there's a knock at the door, and it's Tracy Walter, the brother that she's never seen. And he concocts this story that he needs to get in to make a phone call she allows it, and before we know it, the brothers are there attempting to rape her. Big fight ensues, and it's an intense struggle. And ultimately, who ends up saving her? Her ex-husband, the Raggedy Man, ends up killing them. And when she goes outside, and he ends up dying as well in the process. And when she goes outside and looks and discovers that it's him, and just says, "Hey," and puts her hand on him. And then we see her and the boys on the bus. And he said, "Daddy must have really loved us." And she said, "More than anybody." And he said, "Yeah." And then the younger one says, "I hope we see Teddy again." She said, "Me too." And this film, I can't think of any other film that captures the nuances of love like this one. The love that a woman has for her children, the love that two lost strangers who've kind of given up on love and life can find together, and the love of a father who walked away from his family but still never quit loving them and was pulled back. It was the common thread through all of them, and it's what got them all through it. It causes the pain, but the same pain and wounds that it causes is the same. Love is also the same thing that heals them. And I just saw this movie, and that is a shame. It should have been a bigger hit than what it was. And in a time where so many films seem dead set on simply stimulating you, I highly recommend this film because it's not just about a stimulate, it's about a connection. And it reminds you what a lost art storytelling really is. So I hope you give it a chance. Until next time, thanks.